Hi, this is Peter McLaughlin with Blue Sky Hypnosis, and welcome to Friday Live at 5. Today we're going to be talking about spirit guides in depth. And a special thank you and shout out goes out to Darragh, one of the regulars here on this Friday Live at 5, who suggested this topic probably a couple of months ago. So thanks so much, Darragh, for suggesting the topic. Before we get into that, just kind of the normal things that I like to talk about, which is to make sure that people are comfortable making suggestions, asking questions. The questions that you ask, the comments that you make, always make this a way more interesting experience for everybody. So I'm not just kind of talking into a vacuum. Also, if you have suggestions for future Friday Live at 5s, like Darragh made for today, I hope you'll please make those as well. So without further ado, let's kind of get into things here. I first want to talk about, and I'm not seeing anything coming in, so I'm wondering if something is, oh, here we go. Good, cool. Marie Hogan. Thank you, Marie. It lets me know that there's life out there in the universe, and that really helps a lot. So let's talk about, first of all, what is a guide? What is a spirit guide? So we want to do some basic things. I know we're talking about in depth, but for those people who are new to this concept, I think it's probably valuable to just talk about a few of the basic concepts. The first thing is, what is a guide? What is a spirit guide? So you can think of a spirit guide as a kind of mentor, an advisor, if you will. So in this life, I've got a business coach, I've got friends that I talk to, there's a psychotherapist that I work with from time to time. There are people that I reach out to when I need help and advice. Think of a spirit guide as your principal source of wisdom and advice on the non-physical spiritual level. This is a being or a person that if you learn how to connect with, it can add quite a bit of richness into your life. The mechanism that we use in order to access a spirit guide would be hypnosis. At least that's the mechanism that I use. I'm not trying to say that's the only tool that you can utilize to connect with your spirit guide. You could also use what people might call prayer. You probably could connect with a spirit guide. In fact, I know you can in a state of sleep. There are probably hallucinogenics where you might be able to connect with a spirit guide. I've never done ayahuasca, but from what I understand, when people do this plant medicine in Central and South America, ayahuasca, it's like a combination of a bark from tree and then maybe like a vine or a root. They mix it together into this nasty paste. They have a hallucinogenic experience. And a lot of people will report meeting with Mother Ayahuasca. Again, I haven't done this myself, but from the sounds of it, it almost sounds like Mother Ayahuasca is operating as a kind of spirit guide. And this probably is a good opportunity to talk about the distinction between a personal spirit guide and a non-physical entity. So I would suggest that someone like Mother Ayahuasca is a non-physical entity that a human being can connect with. My suspicion is that you can connect with Mother Ayahuasca without taking ayahuasca. In other words, using hypnosis or going into a state of deep meditation or prayer, you could probably access her and her wisdom. Other entities that you could access if you are religious. If you're a Christian, you might access an ascended master like Jesus or Mary. It could be, for other people in other religions, it could be Buddha. It could be Kuan Yin. It could be any number of other beings, human beings probably, that have existed in the past, that have passed on, that got to a higher level than certainly than what I am right now. Your personal spirit guide, however, seems to be an entity who is assigned directly to you. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today and diving deeper into. So let's talk about why you would want to meet with your spirit guide. Well, I guess the question I would ask is, why would you want to meet with a business coach? Why would you want to meet with your clergy? Why would you want to meet with your psychologist? Why would you want to meet with your athletic coach? Obviously, because you're either having problems with something, you're having difficulties, and you need a different perspective into how to negotiate this particular situation or circumstance, or maybe you want to get to a different level, say of athletic performance, or you want your business to be working better. That would be an example of why you would want to meet with these specialists. And I would submit it's the exact same thing with a spirit guide. So one of the stories that kind of comes to my mind right away, and I meet with my guide every day because I want that assistance, I want that help. And it doesn't mean that my life is perfect, but I sure think that it's a lot easier when you've got people and beings that are supporting you. They're not here to do things for you. Just like an athletic coach isn't going to run out on the field and play that football down for you. They're not going to go out in the court and shoot the basket for you, but they're there to support you in a myriad of other ways. And I think it was about 9 years ago, I was going through a really difficult experience in my personal life. And I met with my spirit guide, and I was asking my spirit guide questions. Now, this is in a state of self-hypnosis. In other words, putting myself into a state of hypnosis, a hypnotic trance, and walking through a series of steps that I do in order to get into that state. And I asked my guide, why am I having this experience? And I think I said, can you show me an animal that represents something about why I'm having this experience? And immediately, the first thing that I saw was a frog that was hopping, boom, boom, boom. Now, between me, you, and the lamppost, what I was really wanting at this time in my life is I was wanting something really kind of powerful, an animal that was really powerful, sleek, intelligent, manly, and so forth. And I was expecting something like a lion or a puma or a cougar or something like that. And I get this little frog, this little green frog going boink, 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 boink. And so in my mind, I kind of pushed this frog out of the way and I said, okay, now I'm ready. Show me the animal that will explain to me why I'm having this really difficult experience in my life. And immediately, bang, I see this frog, boink, 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 boink. And so, a little bit of humility, and I said, okay, I accept, thank you very much, I accept this frog. Why are you showing me a frog? Instant answer I got was, this difficult experience you're having in your life right now represents a leap forward. That's what the hopping was all about. And to me, the wisdom of this is like so hard to explain, because as I just said, I didn't want a frog. I pushed that away. I really wanted this really, big, powerful cat, like a, cougar, mountain lion, regular lion, leopard, you get the idea. And I get this frog. So it wasn't like my conscious mind was making up the frog. I sure as heck didn't want that. And I didn't know why they were showing me a frog. But as soon as they said a leap forward, it was like, oh, of course. When we have the most, arguably, when we experience the most difficulty in our lives, call it pain. These are the times of our greatest, they're often the times of our greatest learning, right? As humans, we basically don't like change. We basically want things to be roughly the same. We want to know what to expect. And we certainly don't want pain. And yet pain is an invitation to us to change. And so the wisdom of showing me this frog, which I didn't want to see, and the leaping forward, at that moment, it brought such great relief, because I think when difficult things happen, we always ask why. Why is this happening? Or why me? And to get an insight into why this was happening on a spiritual basis, in other words, it was helping me spiritually leap forward, I think helped me kind of relax a little more into the experience. To not feel so much, like a victim, or not panic so much, to keep my eyes open. And even in the moment, in my case, to be able to appreciate what was happening, I think helped me to navigate it better. And so that's something that, as I said, I wasn't planning on talking about that. It just popped into my head when I was going through this, that as an example of ways of utilizing a spirit guide. So I'm gonna look over here. Looks like there's a bunch of comments and everything, which is fantastic. And let's see what we got here. Oh, Natalie, good to see you. Welcome. Let's see. I have connected with meditation. You can connect with guides through meditation too. Yeah, We Are One says you can connect with guides through meditation too. Absolutely. Meditation, prayer, hypnosis, self-hypnosis. Probably you could do it with hallucinogenics, although I'm not saying, yeah, go ahead and do that. I'm not telling you not to. I'm not qualified to tell you whether to do that or not, but I think that's probably a way of doing it. And then also in your sleep. Could be a normal dream, it could be a lucid dream. Oh, here we go. Colleen Bailey. Let me get these glasses. Colleen Bailey is saying, Kuan Yin has come to me in meditation, but not as a spirit guide, but as an ascended master. Yes, that would be a perfect example of the distinction between a personal spirit guide. This is somebody that is, or appears to be, assigned to you, versus another being, say maybe they're farther along on the spiritual ladder, that you can call on at any time. So I think, at least for me, religion got kind of tangled up with spirituality. And it wasn't until I was much, much, much older that I began to, at least for me, understand a distinction between the two, right? So I think religion is to spirituality as Home Depot is to home goods or home improvement. You know, yeah, you can definitely improve your home by going to Home Depot. You pretty much wouldn't have to go anywhere else if you didn't want to. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a myriad of other kinds of stores and contractors and so forth where you could obtain the parts and the materials and the tools, or you could hire someone else to do it for you, whatever. And I think with my religious background, I think I somehow got the message. I'm not sure how this happened, but I got the message that they were ascended masters were too important and too busy for me to bother with my petty concerns, and that I should only go to them if it was real important. And I believe that I've learned that that's not exactly true. That they exist to serve all of us, all human beings who are on the field, if you will, on this planet. Right? There's all these coaches on the sidelines, and we're out on the field, you know, crashing into each other and getting hurt and triumph and failure and all these other things. And back on the sidelines, there are all of these coaches, all of these ascended masters, your individual spirit guide that are waiting to help you. And through working with clients, in particular some clients, one particular client from Vietnam, I learned about Kuan Yin. I'd never heard about her before, didn't know anything about her, but very powerful ascended master and can provide significant help along with the other ones. If you just ask, you got to ask. Okay, let's see what we have here. AW, good evening, Peter, and the chat. Root beer. All right, AW root beer. And then Legal Eagle 44. Woohoo! Hello, Legal Eagle. Legal Eagle. Good to see you. Let's see. Yeah, it's just somebody's okay. What else do we have here? Here's a question about ayahuasca that Colleen Bailey is asking. And she's saying, is ayahuasca readily available? Is it legal? Been hearing a lot about it. So I don't think ayahuasca is legal in the United States. I think the active ingredient in ayahuasca is called DMT. My understanding is that your pineal gland, which is often people think of your pineal gland as your third eye. It's a very small little gland that's directly between your eyes and the center of your brain, coming in from the sides and across the middle. And apparently the pineal gland produces DMT. And so this plant medicine, they call it, is two different elements in the forest. I think it's a bark, as I said, and somebody else can correct me, but it might be like the vine, a vine, and then it's mixed together into a brew. And the active ingredient, I believe, in ayahuasca is DMT. My understanding is that in the United States it is not legal, but many people I've talked to that have done ayahuasca have traveled to either Central or South America, and they've worked with shamans. People who are steeped in knowledge about how to use this as medicine, how to use it as spiritual medicine. And I've talked to probably, I don't know, half a dozen or more people who've done this. And some people have had these unbelievable, life-changing experiences. And other people, nothing much at all happened. And other people, maybe they got a couple little glimpses into what was going on. But I hope that that meager bit of information that I have about ayahuasca at least gives you the basis for researching it further if you're interested. Okay, so here's We Are One is saying, I think ayahuasca is illegal in the US and UK, but is legal in the countries where it grows. So that would be Central and South America. I could be wrong, but I think you have to go to a retreat in the rainforest. I could have that wrong though. No, I think that's exactly right, We Are One. The people that I've talked to that have done this, that's exactly what they've done. They've gone to somewhere in Central or South America. I'm sure you can Google this kind of thing. They've got retreats. The nice thing about it is that those folks would know exactly what they're doing. I think that there's a huge distinction between using any kind of mind-altering substance just for recreation versus using it for very spiritual purposes, using it as spiritual medicine, and therefore working with people who are steeped in that sort of knowledge. Again, I'm not advocating it, I'm not knocking it, but working with people who know what they're doing obviously would make a lot of sense. One of the other Friday Lives at 5 that I did, I was talking about spiritual attachments. One of the times when a person is vulnerable to acquiring a spiritual attachment is when they are high or when they are drunk. Doing plant medicine under the guidance of people who know what they were doing, I would assume, it's based upon my experience, at least with doing hypnosis, would be safe from that kind of thing. Okay. So let's move into another question here. And again, some of these questions actually come directly from Darragh. I don't know if he's here today, but if you're not, thanks again for making the suggestion. So does each person have a spirit guide was one of the questions that he posed. And the answer to this is yes. Every person has a spirit guide. Now, is this spirit guide a male? Is the spirit guide a female? Are they old? Are they young? Could it be an animal? Could it be some other kind of entity? The answer to that question is, number one, yes, we all have a spirit guide. And number two, your guide is a non-physical being. And therefore, and this is just my understanding, and I'm not saying my understanding is perfect, okay? I don't know that any of us as humans has a perfect understanding of this. It's all just based on 14 years of doing this work with hundreds, if not thousands of clients, one-to-one, and also reading books and so forth. So I've got a fair amount of experience doing this, and my experience tells me that yes, everyone has a spirit guide, and that the guide, because the guide is a non-physical entity, they can appear to the client in any form they wish, male or female, old or young. They could appear to a client even as an animal. I don't know if that really means that's who they are, because they're energetic, they're energy. And I think they appear to the client in a shape and form that would have the most impact on that particular client. And I'll go into another thing that I wrote down I wanted to talk about today too, which is the spirit guide's personality. So one of the most kind of mind-bending things for me is that the guides not only present in different kinds, different genders, different ages, different kinds of clothing, and sometimes as an animal. It's very infrequent, but it does happen. But they also present with very, very distinct personalities. In other words, sometimes a client might have a guide who is extremely stern, almost taciturn, very few words. Sometimes they don't talk at all. It's all in gestures and so forth, or pointing or leading them somewhere. And then other times the guide can be like a real jokester, like almost making fun of the client. And sometimes they can shift. Sometimes they can start out being really serious, really stern. And by the third or fourth session, now they've totally lightened up and they're just joking around. I think, again, I'll use the example of an athletic coach. The best athletic coaches, I think, kind of interact with each player in a slightly different way. And they bring something different that they think that player needs maybe even on that day. So if the player needs somebody who's really stern, who's a taskmaster, who's taking no crap, that's what they give them. If it's somebody that they kind of need to joke around with to loosen them up, that's what they give them. If they need someone who's going to kind of lift them up and reinforce, that's what they get. If they get someone who's going to push them and say, you haven't done enough, you have to go further, that's what they get. And I think the spirit guides are exactly that way. I mean, I had one client whose guide kept hitting him on the back of the head over and over again. And this is not like my physical hand, you know, hitting another person's physical head. No, he's sitting in the chair, and he's telling me the guide keeps cuffing him on the back of the head to get his attention. And he's like pulling practical jokes on him. It was like he wanted to keep him off balance. And then he gave him, at some point, he gave him a bag of snakes, which was scary to this client, but it was all designed to get his attention, because this particular client is a very, very smart person. He's kind of like an alpha male, and he's used to leading other people. And I think for whatever reason, he needed this kind of approach from his guide in order to be able to pay attention, in order to learn from the guide. So yeah, they can express with a whole bunch of different personalities. From my own experience, I would say for a while, my guide kept showing up wearing different hats. He'd just sit there in this very kind of serene, dignified pose, wearing some kind of wacky hat. And I remember one time I was on vacation with my wife, and I was meditating or hypnosis. It's the same state, really. A state of deep hypnosis and a state of deep meditation is the same brain state. So I'm in this state, guide's there, and the guide's wearing a sailor hat, kind of cocked off to the side. And I said, why are you wearing that hat? And the first thing I got was, it's time to relax. It's time to play. And the reason he had a sailor hat on is because sailors are known for taking leave. You know, they're on the ship for a month or 6 months or whatever it is, and then they come into a port and they kind of let them off. And it's time for them to blow off steam and go out and actually play, have a good time after, you know, being with, well, I don't know if it's the case anymore, but it used to be, you know, 4,000 other men, and they're just working all the time, and now they get to go off and drink and play and all these other things. So the guy was telling me, you're on vacation, it's time for you to play, stop working. And it made me laugh when I saw this, because as I say, this kind of serene, dignified guide is wearing this sailor hat at this weird angle. I was like, what are you doing? So let me see if there are any other comments or questions here that we can jump into. So Barbershop Doll, hello Natalie. She's saying, thanks for the frog story. Love the symbolism like that. You're welcome. You're welcome. And then she's got a question here, which is, on one of your meditations to meet my counsel around the fire, they are always all dressed in white robes with long beards. Gandalf look. Why do you think this is? Well, the first thing that comes to me, and I would say that this is the most common way for guides to appear to people, is, for whatever reason, I will be willing to speculate, but for whatever reason, I would say maybe 70% of the time, 75% of the time, and most of my clients, about 2/3 of my clients, I would say, are female, and about 70 to 75% of the time, guides will appear as male. They often appear as older, often with beards, and often wearing robes. Certainly, and by no means all the time, or even the vast majority of the time, but it's common. It's common for this to happen. And it may be that for whatever reason, you know, maybe from our own stories, our own mythology, we have associated older men with beards as being wise. And so if a person, this is my theory now, if a person is thinking in their mind that old male beard robe is wise, and the guide then presents that way, they've already crossed over one little barrier, one little footbridge across a little stream. It doesn't mean that's who that entity really is, you know, an old man with a beard that wears a robe all the time. It could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. So again, I think it has to do, in this case, with you and with your deeper psyche, and how a group of older men in robes with beards resonates with your psyche. So one of the examples I've given before is that people with near-death experiences. Now, this is a person whose heart has stopped beating. They no longer have brain waves. They're in some kind of clinical setting. They're hooked up to machines. So people can validate that they're dead, clinically dead. And then they're revived with a defibrillator later. Heart starts beating, they breathe, and they come back and they talk about what happened while they were dead. One of the common things that they will talk about is that they met with loved ones who passed before them. Now, they don't ever see the loved one, at least I haven't heard these stories, you know, hooked up to machines, just about to die. Like, people who meet their grandparents might have their grandparent come to them when the grandparent is in their 60s, as opposed to coming to them when they're in their 90s. So in their 60s, they are more robust. It might represent a really important time in the life of the person, you know, the younger person, the grandchild, who's having this near-death experience. When an older person has an NDE and they say meet with their deceased wife, she doesn't come to them and doesn't come to him in her 80s. She may come in like 25 years old and beautiful with flowing hair. Again, they can present any way they want. And so I think they're presenting in a way, in the case of an NDE, where it brings the most comfort. So back to Natalie's question, in the case of meeting your guide, they're presenting in a way that is designed to have the biggest impact on you personally, your psyche, and how you're constructed. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's helpful. Let's see here. Oh, okay, this is a good question. Wendy Adams is saying, can other people see your spirit guide? That's a great question. And I don't think I can answer that question other than to say my belief, my understanding is yes, they could. However, when I'm working with people, I'm always working with them one-on-one. I'm not working with two people at the same time. There have been a few cases where I'm teaching a class where I might work with an entire room at the same time, but it's just really basic stuff. So the literature says that two people go into a past life, they go into the same past life, and they access the same things in that past life. There have been cases where I have had client spirit guide, another person in client's life, and then the other person in the client's life had their guide come, and the client's been able to see that guide. Now, here's the thing. I don't know whether that guide appears the same way to my client that they would appear to the other person in the client's life. I know this is getting super complicated. Let's say I'm working with a wife and she has her husband come in hypnosis, right? Spiritually in hypnosis. And then she has her husband's guide come in hypnosis. She can see her husband's guide. What I don't know is, would her husband's guide appear the same way to my client, the woman, the wife, as the guide would appear to the client's husband? I hope that's less complicated. So the short answer is yes, I think they can, but I haven't had direct experience myself with that, so I'm giving that little caveat. But thanks for asking the question. Darragh also wanted to know, it's kind of a funny question, if you can fire your spirit guide. And he also wanted to know, do you keep the same guide for your whole life? And then I'm going to add to that and say, do you keep the same guide through multiple lifetimes? And I can answer all of these questions by saying this, that in the 14 years that I've been practicing, I have had the experience about 7, maybe 8 times where we bring the client, as we've been doing session after session, to meet with their spirit guide first. And their spirit guide is there, and now there's another guide there. And Spirit Guide 1 says to the client, great job, congratulations, metaphorically shaking the hand or bowing or something like that, and then saying, here's your new guide, Jim, he's going to be working with you now. And the first guide says goodbye. The first time this happened, I almost fell out of my chair. I couldn't believe it. And as I say, subsequently it's happened maybe only 7 or 8 times after that, but completely unbidden. In other words, without me saying to the client, hey, this may happen or anything like that. No, it just happens. And what it seems to be is that the client breaks through or reaches a certain plateau, like they were down here and now they kind of rise up to a new level. And because they rise up to that new level, the initial guide has essentially done his or her job, and they're now handing the client off to the new spirit guide, which I still think is absolutely amazing. And it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And as I say, it's happened enough where I really do believe that this is a thing. Now, can you fire your spirit guide? I don't think you can fire your spirit guide kind of in a human way. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I've never heard of that, and I don't think you can. I think maybe, don't know, but maybe kind of in a spiritual place, you could request a new guide, but chances are you wouldn't even want to, because the thing that usually gets us upset about a guide, for example, is that our life is at the moment difficult, and we believe that the guide should be doing more to help us. And I don't think that's really true. I don't think it's the job of the guide to do it for us. I think it's their job to help. Well, let's talk about this. What is their job? I think their job is to advise us. Just like I said before, like a business coach. Business coach doesn't run the business. They're just giving you advice. And I think we are like the CEO. And you take advice from a number of sources. It could be your spirit guide. It could be your spouse. It could be your business partner. It could be a client. It could be but I think in the end, it's your job to synthesize all of this advice, all of this wisdom, all of this information, and then choose the best possible path. I don't necessarily think that we're supposed to behave like in the military and just salute and say yes, even if you don't agree with it. It's really, really powerful insight. And if you choose to ignore it and it backfires on you, you're probably going to learn from that too. And there's also many, many, many times where a person wants to know the answer to a question, but the guide isn't willing to reveal that information at that juncture, because I think they're operating in a very delicate balance. So they don't want us to struggle so badly in the water that we drown, on the one hand, but on the other hand, they don't want to swim for us. It's almost like being a parent, for those of you who are parents out there. I think there's an art to parenting, and even if you have multiple children, you don't necessarily treat all the children exactly the same way in all situations and circumstances. And it's always a dance, I think, between kind of hands-off, they're doing it, and hands-on, you're doing it for them. Because if you do it for them, they're not going to really progress. And I think the guides view us in the same way, that they want to be careful that they're not subverting our growth and our free will by doing things for us, by making it too easy. But they also don't want us to struggle so much that we just give up. So they're kind of running that middle ground. And in the cases where a client will ask a guide a specific question and the guide doesn't answer the question, I will then have the client ask the guide, is it that you don't want me to know this information right now? And almost always the guide says yes at that point. And I've learned that at that point you can say, what do I need to learn, to know, or to understand or experience before I can be privy to this information that you don't want to share with me right now? And when you ask that question, almost always, they give you some other experience. And once you have that other experience, like you go into a past lifetime, or you learn something about compassion, or you learn something about forgiveness, once you've had that experience and you go back and ask that question, a lot of the times they'll answer it. because again, they didn't want to tell you the end, what happens at the end of the novel before you'd read the rest of it, because that would be sort of what word am I subverting your education. That there would be a piece that would be missing if you just jumped to the end. All right, we'll see what other comments and questions we have here. Let's see. Oh, okay, so Colleen Bailey is saying that her third eye, pineal gland, will not open completely or function properly. Any advice? I think that there are YouTube videos that you could probably get way more in-depth information than what I can give you. Here's what I understand. Here's what I would suggest. Number one, I understand that chlorine, which is contained in a lot of municipal drinking water, will calcify the pineal gland. I also think that there are other kinds of compounds and drugs that mess with the pineal gland. So it might be worthwhile to research what disrupts and calcifies the pineal gland, and then see, hey, am I doing any of those things, and am I in a position to move away from what's calcifying my pineal gland? What decalcifies the pineal gland, don't really know, but that's also something that you could research or look up. And then the third thing is, I think, just practice. So once you've dealt with call it the chemistry of the pineal gland, then it's a matter of practice. It's using it. So the more you go into that part of you, that deeper part of you, call it self-hypnosis or deep meditation, and you allow things to come to you, right? You don't fight and try to get things, you allow them to come to you. And you also don't try to just see everything, because it's not just inner sight, it's also inner hearing, clairaudience, and it's also kinesthetic, inner touching, or inner knowing. Those can also be very powerful means of communication. And sometimes, a person's trying to see something and someone's patting them on the shoulder and like, go away, I'm waiting to see something. No. We want you to metaphorically turn around and see who's touching you on the shoulder and why they're touching you on the shoulder. So all of us generally have a lead system in which we engage with the world. So some people are primarily visual, others are primarily auditory, and others are primarily kinesthetic. And if an auditory or a kinesthetic person is trying to see something with their inner eyesight, it may be more of a struggle for them. While meantime, people are patting them on the shoulder, they're hearing things, but they're thinking they're just thoughts in their mind. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you're struggling, is keep in mind that the communication may not always be visual. So for example, with me, I know that I am primarily an auditory person. And when I meet with my spirit guide every day, it's often kind of hazy, but I hear things very clearly. I hear what they're saying. Sometimes the visual comes through very clearly, but that's not the first thing for me. So that's another thing to consider when you're doing this kind of inner work. So hope that helps. Let's see what else we have here. Is Darragh here tonight? AW is asking. I don't know, I haven't seen him yet. Valerie Nelson. Have guides had a physical life on Earth? So I want to make sure that you understand when I'm answering this question that I'm not 100% sure. So I'm giving you my best information based upon 14 years of practice and the books I've read. So my best information is yes, they have had physical lives here on Earth, and that they have moved beyond the need to reincarnate again. And I think that this really makes a lot of sense. Again, I keep using this example of athletic coaches, but I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me that an athletic coach would have played that sport himself or herself before they move into coaching other people. That just makes common sense to me, because they can understand what it's like to win and to lose, to work as a team and to feel like we're not working as a team, to feel pressure, from the fans and the other players, and to crack under that pressure, to feel pressure and to succeed through that. I think that makes the best possible kind of a coach, because they can really empathize with what you're going through. A person who's never experienced what you're experiencing right now is just not as able, I don't think. Not because they don't want to, but just because they haven't been through it before. So yes, I would say absolutely that the guides have had probably multiple lifetimes on Earth. And because of this, they can sympathize and empathize with us in a much, much greater way. Thanks for the question. Oh yeah, okay. Healing Truth says, hi Peter, at one time I believe Gabor Mate was using ayahuasca in Vancouver, British Columbia. That's very possible. So Gabor Mate is a famous psychologist. Because he's a psychologist, maybe he was doing this under the auspices of some kind of a trial or some kind of clinical research. That's my guess, but I don't know that for sure. For those of you who don't know who Gabor Mate is, as I say, he's just a brilliant psychologist. And one of the reasons that I feel so kind of in tune with him is that I believe we both share the same opinion about addiction, for example. And a person can be addicted not just to drugs or alcohol, but also to shopping and to food. I think that's kind of the biggest one. Gambling. There's all kinds of things we can be addicted to. And what Gabor Mate talks about, and what I've been talking about for a long time, is it's not the behavior that the person's engaging in. It's the demand underneath it that's driving that behavior. What pain are they trying to temporarily narcotize by this behavior? That's what's important. That's what we should be dealing with. We should be helping people with the pain that they're struggling with. Because, for example, with overeating, if a person's obese, and they're obviously overeating to a very significant amount, then it's clearly, in my opinion, some kind of hole they're trying to fill inside of them. They're trying to distract themselves from some kind of underlying pain. They're trying to protect themselves from experiencing some kind of old trauma and not wanting to experience that again. So Gabor Mate, for those of you who are interested, does an amazing job talking about these things. I think he's really, a huge and important voice in the field of psychology. So thanks for mentioning him. And if anybody can figure out why he was doing ayahuasca in Vancouver, that would be kind of interesting. I'm guessing, I'm putting my money on it was some kind of a clinical trial or a research project of some sort. But thanks for the comment. Okay, so Valerie Nelson is saying, I find myself apologizing to my guides for being such a full-time job. That's actually hysterical. And I think that would be kind of like, and no offense intended when I say this, because I think we're all like that. So it's kind of like, a 4-year-old apologizing to their mother or apologizing to their father for being, a handful. We're all probably, in a spiritual sense, kind of like 4-year-olds. And like 4-year-olds, we're all a handful. And it doesn't mean that we're bad people, and it certainly doesn't mean that we have too many problems. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you. That's their role. That's their job. I don't think it's like us where it's sapping all of our energy. That we only have so much energy. I don't think that it affects guides that way. I think they handle it in a different way. So I think you can feel much more relaxed about calling on them whenever you need them, however often you need them, that you're not inconveniencing them, you're not making things difficult for them. If they don't want to answer a question you have, they're not going to answer your question. But they'll always be present for you. At least that's my experience. So it is pretty funny though. Other people are feeling that way too. All right, Shannon Marie is saying, I definitely feel my guide, but have not seen them. Once I think I did. So I'm curious, and maybe you can respond, and maybe I will actually see it, maybe I won't, not really sure. But when you feel their presence, what most people would report, if it really is your guide, is most people would report feeling a sense of familiarity, relaxation, acceptance, calm, at peace. So one of the things when I'm working with clients that I want to make sure when we first meet the guide is that it really is the guide. That it isn't somebody showing up just sort of randomly or for nefarious purposes. And one of the things you can do is ask them, are you my guide? You can ask, are you here for my highest and greatest purposes? Are you here to help me? And when people say, oh my gosh, I feel so comforted, I feel so accepted, I feel so loved, I know it's their guide at that point, unless it's like a deceased relative. So Shannon Marie, if you can, respond, and if I can, hopefully I'll see it. How do you feel when you're in the presence of your guide? I would find that very interesting. So thanks for the comment. Let's see here. AW, I don't see or feel a guide for some reason, despite being told I have many. Okay, so AW, what you may wish to do, and you're one of the regulars, awesome, I'm glad you're here, is check out the pendulum video if you haven't already. I've got a video here on my channel. It's how to use a pendulum, and it shows you how to calibrate the pendulum, how to get it to a point where you're confident that it's giving you accurate answers. Once you're there, ask, do I have a block to meeting with my guide? If you get a yes, then you want to ask, is it because I'm ashamed of meeting with my guide? I'm embarrassed of meeting with my guide. I'm afraid of meeting with my guide. Just keep going until you can figure out what that block is, and then come back here or send me an email, and even if you have problems with that, and we can figure out how to help you meet with your guide. Sometimes, one of the things that I have found working with my clients over the years is that sometimes a client needs to meet with someone else prior to meeting with their spirit guide. So a recent example is I was working with a woman in her 30s, and we asked, one of the things I do first, like after we do an intake, we talk, we do a deep dive into a person's biography, into their past. We spend particular focus on old traumas that they've had. We talk about what they want in life as opposed to what they're getting. Then we have them use a pendulum. So when I was having this woman use a pendulum, I asked, am I free to meet with my spirit guide if I choose to do so? Another question you could ask AW. And the answer came back, no. So what I've learned is the next question is there someone else that's important to me that's important for me to meet with prior to meeting with my guide? That answer came back, yes. That's what I almost always get. And this may be the case for you, AW. Especially if there's somebody that you were super close to in your life who passed away, grandparent, parent, sibling, someone like that. That when you meet with that other person, let's call it a deceased relative, then you're free to meet with the guide. For whatever reason, it's almost like an introduction into the spirit world. They want you to connect with that person. It also helps to heal the grief that is underlying the death of that person. And once you connect with that person, call it a relative, then you are free to meet with the guide, and it goes just fine. And believe me, I had to blunder into this. It took me years before I understood the kinds of questions to ask before you embark on something like this, because it can really head off at the pass, as it were, different kinds of obstacles and blocks that would otherwise be the case. And that is a really, really common one. So use the pendulum, you could ask, am I free to meet with my guide if I choose to do so? You should probably get a no to that if you haven't been able to meet with your guide heretofore. And if the answer is no, you can't meet with your guide, then say, is there someone else that's important for me to meet with prior to meeting with my guide? If that's the case, then if you're ready, go meet with that person first, then see if you can meet with your guide. It could be a different kind of block. The different kind of block would usually be that if there's something about you that is ashamed or embarrassed or not feeling worthy of meeting with that guide. Let's say you did something heinous in a past lifetime and your conscious mind your subconscious mind knows that. It may be that you're afraid of meeting with that guide. It would almost be like when we were kids, right? And you did something you knew was wrong. And now you had to go fess up to your parents. Or worse, you had to go fess up to the parents of your friend. Let's say you're like 7 or 8 years old, you broke a window. I've done that. And now you have to go tell, your friend's mother or father that you broke their window. I mean, that feeling is pretty bad. You don't want to do it. So I've seen things like that happen from time to time. So hopefully that helps you. And if you run into anything super difficult, just come back here and place a comment or send me an email. My website is blueskyhypnosis.com. So thanks for that, and I hope it helped you. Let's see. Colleen Bailey, thank you. Thank you very much. She said that the meditations and tracks are awesome. Appreciate that. We are one. I have only seen one guide. He was a tall, thin blue alien that looked like a Jedi from Star Wars. Why do you think that is? Okay, so that's a really good point, and it's a great question. First thing I wouldn't want to know in that kind of circumstance is that your guide? So if we were working one-on-one, I would have you ask him or her, are you my spirit guide? And because it's presenting in a non-human form, next question would be, are you here for my highest and best interests? Are you here to help me? Now, assuming that you get the right answer, the yeses to all of those questions, then you could ask, why are you presenting in a non-human form? And there could be a lot of reasons for that. I mean, when you hear about how many planets there are, how many stars, how many suns there are in the universe, like in the known universe, it just boggles your mind. And I've definitely helped clients go to other lifetimes, I should say, where they lived on different planets. When people talk about aliens, what I've come to realize is, to this planet, we're kind of aliens too. If this is not our permanent home, so Jesus said in the Bible, he said, somebody help me. It was something like, I am here, but I am not of this place. I am in the earth. I am on the earth, but I am not of the earth. Something like that. In other words, that this is not our permanent home, right? So if this is not our permanent home, then we're kind of aliens too. But it always concerns me, I guess, a little bit when something presents in a non-human form, and I just want to investigate it further. I want to make sure we're not walking down a path before we can verify that this being is the spirit guide, and or that they are here for clients' highest and best interests, that they're here to help, right? All of those things I would want to check out first, and that's what I would recommend you do. And then also, if all of those things check out, just ask them. Say, why are you presenting to me as in a blue non-human form? And you'll get an answer. And the answer might be, you lived a lifetime on a planet where everybody looked like that. And that there's probably something significant about that lifetime. And you might even ask, is it in my highest and best interest for you, guide, to take me back to that planet? Do you want me to remember something from that planet? This kind of leads me into another piece too, which is, and for those of you who've done my tracks on meeting your spirit guide on my YouTube channel, and if you haven't already subscribed, where's my little subscribe button? Please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Blue Sky Hypnosis. So for those of you who've done my Meet Your Spirit Guide tracks on the YouTube channel, one of the things that you'll notice is that there's a moment at which the guide gives you a gift. Now that gift could be, I just happen to have one here. It could be a stone, like something like that. It could be a microscope. It could be a telescope. It could be a knife. It could be a book. It could be a box. It could be a box with nothing inside of it. It could be a piece of jewelry. It could be all different kinds of things. And what you always want to know, and what I have on those tracks is, of all the gifts you could have given me at this stage of my spiritual development, why did you choose to give me that gift? Because they're giving you the gift because it represents something. It has some kind of meaning to it. And it's very important, I think, to understand what is the meaning behind that gift. Because they're trying to teach you, and they're teaching you in a variety of different ways. And I would say in general that a spirit guide teaches in a sort of artistic way. So the more you get interested, like in filmmaking, the more you see what the filmmaker is actually doing. Like they're telling you a story, but it's not primarily through the words that the characters speak out of their mouths, but it's all of these images that they're showing you. They are setting things up that 4 or 5 scenes later come to pass. They're alluding to things. They're moving you emotionally. They're touching you with color. They're touching you with sound. There's so many different levels that a filmmaker is working on. And ultimately, it's really designed to reach not primarily your conscious, rational, logical mind. It's primarily designed to reach your emotional, subconscious mind. So I think that's exactly how the spirit guides work too. And if you're aware of that, if you kind of go into it with an open heart, yes, open mind, absolutely, but an open heart, I think that's really, really important. Because oftentimes they're giving you something that's designed to fill some kind of perceived void you have in your life. Or they're trying to give you something that will help you to look deeper into something. Or they're giving you something, actually, and this kind of gets to the blue alien, they may be giving you something that you owned in a past lifetime. So I'm working with a client right now who was given a kind of heavy necklace with a heavy pendant on it. And she immediately said that it seemed medieval, from say the 1000s, or the 1500 or something like that. And based on what was going on in her life, I immediately had this picture in my mind of exactly why she was having these experiences, pains in her neck and stuff that was going on in her life. I didn't say anything. And I had her ask the guide, did I wear this necklace, this pendant, in a previous lifetime? The answer was yes. And as through 2 or 3 sessions, as we went into that past lifetime, sure enough, something happened in that past lifetime that exactly, perfectly corresponded with what she is struggling with right now and with a physical pain that she has in her neck, where this pendant was hanging from. So again, it's not like necessarily you and I, how we talk to each other. It's way more like artistic, trying to reach your deeper subconscious mind, trying to move you on this deeper level, which, if you think about it, is exactly how dreams work. People wake up and go, what the hell was that? Well, it's trying to reach you metaphorically. It's trying to reach you emotionally, because that's the sort of deeper part of us that's really driving our existence. So, long way of answering your question. I hope it helped. Thank you for asking. Let's see what we got here. Janice Nicole. I'm not going to read through the whole thing right now. I'm just going to put it up. AW, I feel the same way. I'm told my guides are very respectful and prompt and so eager to help me, but I've never sensed them, nor seen, nor heard them as much as I try to connect and ask. So Janice, the same thing. What I would say is it's far less likely that the guide doesn't want to connect with you. Far more likely that you, subconsciously, not consciously, subconsciously don't want to connect with that guide for the reasons I said before, like shame, guilt, whatever, like, breaking your neighbor's window when you're 7 years old and then having to go talk to the mom. I didn't want to do that. I was panicking. My heart was pounding. Or the guides want you to do something else first. They want you to learn something. They want you to have some other experience. And that could be meeting with, for example, a deceased relative or a deceased loved one, then meeting with the spirit guide. The other possibility it could be is a spiritual attachment. So I did a live a couple weeks ago, I think it was now, on spiritual attachments. This is like a spiritual parasite that gloms onto your body or your spiritual energy and kind of lives off you or feeds off of you, in a sense, energetically. That attachment could be the blocking mechanism from you meeting your guide. I would again, just like with AW, I would suggest that you try with a pendulum and see if you can use that as a tool to uncover exactly what is creating this block. Because once you know what's creating the block, you can definitely deal with that. So, cool. Good luck to you. Jose Cruz. Jose, how are you, my man? It's a friend of mine. What about their name? Remember Archimedes? Could it be the real Archimedes, or just that name as a symbolism of what I needed to find out about the name? Good seeing you again. Good seeing you too, Jose. So could it be the real, so he's talking about the name of his spirit guide. And he said it right here, so I guess I can say it. Is his spirit guide the Greek, the famous Greek Archimedes? Or is his guide just happened to be named Archimedes? Or is there some kind of a connection whereby he knows, the guide knows, that that's gonna move Jose in a certain way? I would say it could be one or it could be the other. It's probably more likely it's not the Archimedes, but the way you could deal with that is just ask him. You could say, why? Well, one of the questions I always want to ask people when they find out what their spirit name is, the name of the client, the explorer, is ask your guide, what is the meaning of my name? What is the spiritual meaning of my name? And once you understand what the spiritual meaning of your name is, ask if that is part of your path or your lesson for this lifetime. And likewise, you can ask the guide, what is the guide's name? Okay, he tells you it's Archimedes. Awesome. You can ask the guide, what is the meaning of your name? What is the spiritual meaning of your name? And then you could ask, are you connected to or related to the famous Greek Archimedes in some way? If so, in what way are you connected or related to that Archimedes? So one of the huge breakthroughs for me, and I owe a huge debt of gratitude to a person that served as kind of a mentor for me when I was studying hypnosis and hypnotherapy back in 2006, was that you can feel free to ask these questions. If they don't want you to know the answer to the question, they're not going to tell you the answer to the question, but they might tell you 6 months from now. But you can certainly ask the question. So Jose, I would highly recommend that you go back in and just ask him, what is the meaning of your name, Archimedes, and are you related to the famous Greek Archimedes? So cool. Thanks for asking the question, and good to see you too. Valerie Nelson is saying, never met my guides, but I'm pretty sure my childhood imaginary friend I spoke to until I was 5 is one of them. Could be. Could be. Young children, until they are the ages of between 7 and 9 years old, are always in a hypnotic state. They haven't learned what's not possible, what's not, in quotation marks, acceptable. So they are way more open to the spiritual realm than we are, until they get it kind of metaphorically beaten out of them. So yeah, I mean, you could meet with that childhood friend again in this state. Why not? Why not go into a hypnotic state and call in that childhood friend and find out who he is or she is? And find out if they're a guide of yours, or if it's someone that you lived on another planet with, or it's someone you lived in a past lifetime with. That would be pretty cool. And I see no reason why you couldn't do that. Just scrolling through here, folks. Here's ER, looks like ERI is saying, another experience I had during one of your guided hypnosis was meeting a crow as a spirit guide. The guiding voice invited me to ask questions, so I did. But the crow answered as a crow. Interesting. Interesting. So I guess what I would want to know is the crow your principal spirit guide? Is the crow a spirit guide? Is the crow not a spirit guide at all? Oftentimes with animals, what I find when an animal shows up, so our intention is to meet with the guide, first and foremost. When an animal shows up, what I've learned is often it's the role of the animal to lead the client to the guide. Now, why they need to go through that as opposed to the guide just being there, not really sure. It may have to do with faith and trust. It may have something to do with taking them deeper into a hypnotic state. But that is definitely something I've noticed. Like a dog could be there. Some kind of a wild animal could be there. In this case, a crow. The first thing I would be thinking about is, are you here to lead me somewhere I need to go? That's a question I would ask of the crow. And the crow may turn and start flying. If the crow does that, you hop up in the air and start flying too. You're not bound by the physical laws of this planet, right? It's almost like that difference, the Matrix thing. You can fly with the crow, and the crow may be present to take you somewhere else that you need to go. That could be a past lifetime, or it could be to meet with your spirit guide. But it's so cool that you raised this point, because again, like I say at the beginning of these lives, the comments and the questions definitely take us in directions we otherwise would not go into. So I'm gonna take one or two more questions, and before I do this, I just want to talk about next week. Come on, no, I already had that one up there. Next week I'm going to be doing a live at 5 on managing fear in these uncertain times. So I can't hardly believe this, that I'm about to say this, because it's true, but I'm almost 60. And in my lifetime, I have never, ever experienced anything like what we have collectively experienced as a planet since, well, in the United States, since March of this year. And for other people, it's gone back even further. But I have never experienced anything like this. And I know that it's creating a cataclysm of fallout, divorces and suicides and drug use and people losing their businesses and losing their homes, and all kinds of giant tumultuous events are occurring, and it's created an enormous amount of fear. And certainly, I wrote a post on this, like in April or something, and I talked about fear being pumped through the circulatory system of the communications network, and it feels like it's being done nonstop. And so many of my clients have been dealing with fear, and so many of the people that I've interacted with on my YouTube channel have been dealing with fear. And so I thought, why not do a Friday Live at 5 on how you can use hypnosis and other strategies and techniques to deal with this fear. Like, you can't eliminate it, but you can minimize it. And when you minimize the fear, it changes your autonomic nervous system, that changes your health, your sleep, digestion, all sorts of things. And so, I hope you guys will consider joining me next Friday Live at 5 Eastern for managing fear in these uncertain times. All right, let's see a couple more questions here. All right, so how to find the spirit guide, how to realize he or she is our spiritual guide. This is from Rupa Mansi. So the technique I use is hypnosis. When you go into a hypnotic state, what you're really doing is you're lowering the oscillation frequency of the brain. So as measured in hertz, that frequency is slowing down. And as this happens, certain parts of the brain that were lit up now go dark. Certain parts of the brain that were dark now light up. And it gives you access to abilities and realms that you don't have in the state that we're all in right now, which is a beta state of awareness or consciousness, waking consciousness. So we use hypnosis as a tool to kind of open that part of a person, and then we direct them to their spirit guide. Now, I always use something that would be called, say, a sacred space, and that's just a place you already feel comfortable in the outdoors. I like to use the outdoors. It could be the mountains, could be the ocean, it could be rivers, lakes, meadows, forest, desert. It doesn't really matter, but a place you're already comfortable. And in your mind, we're bringing you deeper, deeper, deeper down into hypnosis, where then you meet with your spirit guide. Now, we would want to make sure that you feel really, really comfortable with that guide. If you don't feel comfortable, we're going, okay, is that really your spirit guide? We would have you ask, are you my spirit guide? If the entity doesn't answer you, not a great sign. If they say, yes, I'm your guide. If you're still unsure, you can say, did you come here to help me? Yes. Are you here for my highest and greatest good? Yes. Now, I'm feeling very comfortable at this point that this is your spirit guide. There are other ways you can meet your guide. I mentioned them earlier in this broadcast. So you could do this in deep meditation. You could do it in deep prayer. You could probably meet a guide, and we probably all do, in sleep and in dreams. And there are probably ways of doing this with different kinds of plant medicines. We talked about ayahuasca a little while back. If you didn't see that, you might want to rewatch the earlier part of this broadcast, but I hope that helps you. Thanks for asking. Oh, so Valerie Nelson is saying, regarding the sort of personality or the attitude of the guide, that I mentioned that they can be taciturn, they can be jovial, they can be comforting, they can be stern and harsh. And she's suggesting maybe that's how they were when they were on this planet in a physical incarnation. That's true, it might be. And it might be that when you get a guide in the life between lives, that you get somebody who has those characteristics that you really need. Like, you might need somebody that's really good at comforting. I might need somebody that's really good at kicking my ass. Or it could be that the guide takes on what they need to take on in that moment. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it has something to do with me being in North America, that a very large percentage, surprisingly so, 20% maybe, of people that I work with, rough estimate, will have Native Americans as their guides. And for whatever reason, oftentimes these Native American guides don't do a lot of speaking. They have an expression on their face, or they make a gesture, like with their hand or with their arms. And I've had these cases again where, you know, like a Native American guide for the first 3 or 4 sessions will be very few words, rather stern and almost imposing. You know, the client still feels comfortable with them, but they're imposing. And then all of a sudden, it's like the client breaks through something and the guide just becomes kind of just a joker, just starts dancing around and smiling. And so I really do think that they can shift how what they're giving you. Like that example I said before, the way a really, really good athletic coach can interact with different players differently. And maybe the same player interact differently with that player on one day or one part of the season versus another situation at a different part of the season. I think they're able to adapt to what we need, because we don't always need the exact same thing probably. You know, there are times where, you know, like a parent, where being stern is really called for, and other times where being soft and more comforting and compassionate is more called for. So that's what I tend to think. Now, could they have been that way in their lifetimes? I suppose they could have, you know, and maybe that's how they learned to be those different ways. So really, really cool point. Okay, so Natalie is saying, yes, I get so frustrated and I want to know more, and the guide won't respond. And later I learn it wasn't the correct timing. Absolutely, absolutely. They're not going to preempt some kind of a natural process. You know, they're not going to ride the bike for you. They're going to make sure that you're moving along at the correct pace and in the correct order. So if you ever get yourself in that situation again, which I'm sure you already know, where you're frustrated, you're not getting the answers that you want, just ask the guide, would you prefer not to give me the answer to that question right now? And if they nod their head, they say yes, then you can relax. And then you can ask, is there something you want me to learn or experience before you give me that answer? Chances are really good they're going to say yes. Then go have that experience. Ask them if they'll let you have that experience right now. You go have that experience, then you come back and say, now that I've had that experience, will you answer my question? Or will you let me do this other thing? Chances are good they will. Because it's not, we talk about timing and we have this sense of linear time, past, present, and future. But quantum physics teaches us there is no time. That's an illusion created by a planet that is rotating on its own axis and then going around the sun. That's what gives us time, night and day and the seasons. Just outside of that, there is no time. So theoretically, you should be able to do a number of these things in a compressed amount of linear time. Now, there's also another concept, which is, I think sometimes things need to percolate, things need to bake, things need to steep for a while. In our minds is what I mean. And so sometimes you do need linear time to have your brain reorganize itself to a new experience or new information. So that's a small caveat that I put in there. Okay, we'll take maybe one or two more here. And I hope you guys will consider showing up next Friday for the Managing Fear in Uncertain Times. All right, so Veronica Cruz. Hi, Peter. I process the world through emotions. Hi, Veronica. And how I sense things. That's how I communicate with my guides. I sense the information and translate to words to expand the message. But feeling is the first. Yeah, I totally get that. And I think it's a misconception that is born by our society, because our society talks about the power of visualization, and we have such a visual society. But we have all of these other senses. And I think it's really important to honor your other senses to the same degree, at least, if not more, than your sense of sight or visualization. And when I work with clients, it often becomes readily apparent if somebody's visually oriented or if they're oriented more towards auditory or kinesthetic. And it's important for the auditory and kinesthetic people to realize that their senses are just as important as the visual, and to be okay with that. Excuse me, be okay with not seeing in quotation marks because it's inner sight. Be okay with not seeing your guide maybe, or seeing your guide clearly. But if you're hearing the guide clearly, you know you're auditory. If you're feeling, you know that you're more kinesthetic. And that other sense can draw you in to the other ones, that can draw you into the visual, can draw you into the auditory in your case. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, because I don't think that can be stressed enough for people to really hear that and to feel more comfortable with their lead representational system. Hey, look at that. There's Darragh. Darragh, today's for you, man. Hey all, I get the same. All I do is listen to the ringing and wait for something to happen. I usually forget it's happening soon after. High frequency communication, I believe. I think they're talking about ringing in the ear. Some people will say that's your spirit guides trying to communicate with you. I think that there's some truth to this. When that happens to me, I just pay attention to whatever's going on right at that moment and try to understand if there's a message in all of that for me. So I think that's what they're talking about. We Are One says, I believe your ears can ring if your own vibration rises quickly. Happens to me too. I suppose that would be another possibility. Hadn't considered that, but I think it's pretty cool. Okay. Here's Soft Breezy Day. If an entity is not your guide, is it going to be honest? Asking because I fear trying to meet my spirit guide. because I've been told by more than one person that I have attachments. Okay, so soft, breezy day. First thing I would do if I were you is use a pendulum. Go to the pendulum video on my YouTube channel, Blue Sky Hypnosis, and type in, look for pendulum, watch it. I think it's like, I don't know, 11 minutes, and it teaches you why it works this way, how to use it, how to calibrate it to ensure that you're getting accurate answers. Use the pendulum to determine for yourself if you have attachments. If you have attachments, I've got 2 videos. It's part 1, part 2 on my YouTube channel, Blue Sky Hypnosis. And the first one sort of gives you a philosophical underpinning of what spiritual attachments are and how you get them. Part 2 actually walks you through removing those attachments. So yes, if you have attachments, that could prevent you from meeting with your spirit guide. So you would want to move them out first. Now, and again, this is just my experience and my understanding. So I'm not trying to say this is engraved in stone someplace, but this is my experience, that for whatever reason, they can't seem to lie if you ask them a direct question. They can not answer you, but they don't seem to be able to give you a direct lie to a direct question. Are you here for my highest and greatest good? They don't seem to be able to say, yeah, when that's not true. They either have no answer or they just say no. It's really, I don't think that that's our experience as humans with other humans necessarily, but that seems to be the case in the spirit realm. That is what I've experienced over the past 14 years. So again, I would first go back to the pendulum, find out if you have attachments. If you do, clear out the attachments. Once you clear out the attachments, now meet with your guide, see if you can. Maybe it's somebody different that shows up. If somebody different shows up, then say, are you, if you suspect it's not your guide, are you my spirit guide? Are you here for my highest and greatest good? Are you here to help me? If you're still not sure of all of this, what you can do then is bring in an ascended master. If you're Christian, bring in Jesus, bring in Mary. If you want to bring in Buddha, bring in Buddha. Bring in someone that you know for a fact is rock solid, you can rely on. And then ask this ascended master, okay, this joker says that he's my spirit guide. Is that true? Is he here for my highest and greatest interest? I've done this with clients sometimes, and the ascended master comes in and might say no. And then we say, well, off you go, get out of here. Or the ascended master might say, yes, that is your spirit guide. And now we can relax. So hopefully that helps you. And that's a really great question. I'm glad you asked it. Really good point. Not sure I would have just, got to that on my own. So I'm really glad you asked it. I wanted to say that two things, I guess. One is, how does a guide teach you? So what I wrote down today is a guide will show you. They'll, by giving you a gift, by leading you somewhere, by putting you in a situation that will help you remember or understand something really important for you to understand or to remember, that you can grow and learn from. So it might be something you have to heal from the past. They'll support you so you can get this feeling like you're not alone. When I know that a client is going to be going into a past lifetime with a significant trauma, sometimes what I'll do is I'll have client ask guide, is it in my highest and best interest for you, guide, to accompany me into that past lifetime? So that as the client walks through the past lifetime, they can always see the guide over there. They always have this talisman or touchstone to, I know that I'm safe. So that's another way that they will help you. They'll lead you. They'll literally lead you. Do you want to take me? Lead me somewhere. They'll literally walk first and you follow them. And you can ask them questions. Doesn't mean they're always going to answer the questions, but often they do. So when I asked that question to my guides during this difficult time in my life 9 years ago, why did you show me a frog jumping? And they just answered the question right away. A leap forward. You're experiencing a leap forward through this difficulty. You're compressing the amount of time to learn the spiritual lesson. So these are ways that they will teach you. And I guess I would just roll through real quick. some of the obstacles to meeting your spirit guide. We've talked about a number of them today. So trying too hard could present an obstacle. It's like trying too hard to go to sleep. You're not going to fall asleep if you try too hard. If you try too hard to catch fish, they're all going to scatter. Disbelief. If you have an inherent disbelief in all of this, that could present a block. And sometimes with a pendulum, you can determine, yeah, that's what my block is. I have a disbelief. I don't consciously think I do, but on some level, I have a disbelief. If that's the case, what I have learned through many, many years of trial and effort, trial and error, I think is the saying, is you can just close your eyes, say to yourself, I hereby release, I hereby suspend all of my disbelief for the next 60 minutes. Sounds crazy, but it works. I'm not sure that's happened one time with a client when we've identified that either fear or disbelief is their block, sometimes both, and that we have them say, I hereby suspend, not release or eliminate, just suspend it. We're just going to set it off to the side for a certain amount of time. And then that person is able to go right in. Amazing. I find this amazing anyway. And then the other one is that you might have to meet someone else first. And it could be that you have a fear. I mentioned this before, but I think it's worth saying again. When I broke my neighbor's window with a baseball when I was probably older than 7, I was probably like 11 years old, having to walk inside their house and tell their mother and tell their father I just busted their window with a baseball, oh man, it was a horrible feeling. And sometimes I find that clients don't want to, subconsciously, meet with their guide, probably because they did something nasty in a past lifetime, and they're afraid of, like I was, of kind of facing the music. Now, the guide isn't, just like the parents didn't scream at me, they were fine. They were glad I said something about it, and we arranged for how I was going to fix this. But you know, the anticipation is always worse than the actual experience. The guides they're not going to hold it against you. But our subconscious mind and our deeper self doesn't always know that. So that's another reason that you could be blocked. All right, one more question, and then we'll call it a weekend. Thank you all for these questions and these comments, guys. I mean, it really, I just find it so kind of exciting. I know I'm a nerd with all of this. I get that, and I'm cool with that. But it makes it so much more pleasurable to do this. And as you can tell, I mean, I always think, oh, I'll do an hour, and then I end up going longer and longer. So thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for asking the questions. We'll do one more. All right. Kiki K says, Peter, oh, okay, great. This is a good question. Love it. Peter, why would attachments prevent you from meeting with your guides? Okay, answer to this question is, you have become, your body, or probably your energetic or etheric body, has become the home of these energetic spiritual parasites. They know that when you start cluing in to your spiritual power, and meeting your spirit guide is kind of the principal way, that's the doorway into your spiritual power. When they know, when you meet your spirit guide, the jig is up for them. That you're going to send them packing. That they're not going to have this temporary home anymore, and they don't want to be evicted. That's the answer. So, I love long-winded answers, and this one isn't, and I feel like something's wrong. But that's the answer anyway. Guys, thank you again for asking such great questions. As always, please feel free to make suggestions about future topics. I find this kind of the most challenging part of doing this every single Friday is coming up with topics, you know, week after week. So, you know, your suggestions are very, very welcome about topics. I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome weekend, and we will see you next Friday for managing, that would be pronounced managing fear in uncertain times. Take care and have an awesome weekend. Bye.